permanent delegates of the National Council of Provinces. Now, the NCOP is the second House of Parliament. Yesterday, we witnessed Chief Justice Mogoeng preside over the swearing-in of members of the National Assembly. That also included the election of the Speaker and Deputy Speaker of that House. Now, the Chief Justice was also in the chair when the new 400 members of the National Assembly elected Jacob Zuma as President of the Republic. Well, today the Chief Justice will preside in the NCOP. There he will administer the oath of office or an affirmation to 54 permanent delegates. He's also expected to preside over the election of the House's new chairperson. Now, the NCOP has 90 members in total, but only 54 of them are permanent. The remaining 36 are special delegates and are sent to the NCOP as and when their provincial legislatures require them to be here. This is how the numbers are broken down. The ANC has 33 permanent delegates and 27 special delegates. The Democratic Alliance, 13 permanent delegates and 7 special delegates. The Economic Freedom Fighters, 6 permanent delegates and 1 special delegate. The Inkatha Freedom Party has 1 permanent delegate and no special delegates. So too the United Democratic Movement with 1 permanent delegate and no special delegate. And then finally, the National Freedom Party, a new kid on the block, has no permanent delegates but has 1 special delegate. Now, the special delegates only have voting rights on Section 76 bills. Those are bills which are deemed to have a direct impact on provinces. Now, to talk to us about today's proceedings and, of course, the legislative powers of the NCOP, I am joined once again by Advocate Zureya Adhikari. She is the Chief Legal Advisor to Parliament. Good morning, Advocate, and welcome.
Good morning to you and good morning to your viewers, and thank you for having me.
No, it's really good to have you here. Ma'am, today it's the NCOP. Yesterday, as I mentioned very briefly, we witnessed the National Assembly. How important a house is this to the working of Parliament?
Well, it is as important as the National Assembly. The two houses have distinct but equally important powers in terms of the Constitution, in terms of the legislative process, legislation, except for Section 74(3) legislation, goes through both houses. So legislation must be processed by both houses. Both houses have oversight functions over the executive, more expressly in respect of the executive in the National Assembly, but more specifically defined powers in respect of provincial oversight and local government in the National Council of Provinces. So the powers are slightly differently defined, but both equally important. So by and large, the National Council of Provinces are there to look after the provincial interests.
All right. So can you explain to us this distinction of permanent delegates and special delegates?
Well, yeah, the permanent delegates are here on a permanent basis, and they cease to be members of the legislatures once elected. And the chairperson of the NCOP is elected from amongst the permanent delegates. I think that is by and large the process that we're going to see, the purpose of today's proceedings, where they elect a chairperson. And that is quite a powerful position in the process of Parliament. The chairperson of the NCOP is, together with the Speaker of the National Assembly, the executive authority of Parliament. And as we discussed yesterday, their powers in respect of the precinct of Parliament are very broad and in terms of both the Constitution and legislation. So yes, a special delegate, an election of a special delegate is in fact quite an important process.
All right. So then the special delegates, they're not members of the House, no?
Yes, special delegates become, they are members, oh sorry, yes. Special delegates, yes. They are special delegates. That's
so
what they are called.
They're members of provincial legislatures.
That's correct. They remain members. Right. Yes.
Now let's then talk about the role between the chairperson of the NCOP and the Speaker of the National Assembly. You said that they're the executive authority. Elaborate a little bit more about their powers as a team.
You know, there's the Financial Management of Parliament Act, and in terms of the Financial Management of Parliament Act, which sets out your governance structure for Parliament, much like your PFMA in government, the executive authority maintains is your treasury for parliamentary finances, for your assets, for your resources of Parliament, ensures good governance, holds the accounting officer, who is the Secretary to Parliament, to account for the expenditure, does all the budgetary controls, ensures that the APP and, you know, all the good governance structures are in place, ensures that there are policies that speak to the mandate of Parliament and supply chain management and so on.
All right. And then obviously now I want to come back to the issue of the executive, and obviously the NCOP's role in holding the executive accountable. Does it have that function, and just does it have that role in holding the executive accountable?
Yes. Although cabinet members and deputy ministers are not members of the NCOP, in terms of Section 66 of the Constitution, they may participate in the proceedings of the NCOP. And in that way, besides the powers that the NCOP has to call anyone or to summons anyone before them, that is how the NCOP can engage with members. And of course, there are other mechanisms as well to get the public to see or to view how ministers are performing, or what is before the House at any given time.
So, and to a large extent, the NCOP, as I mean, we witnessed, for instance, last year. I'll make an example when the Protection of State Information Bill came before the NCOP. What the NCOP then did was to say, look, we're not entirely satisfied with the bill as we're getting it from the National Assembly. We will then go out and do, for instance, our own public hearings and all of that. So the NCOP is entitled to do that.
Well, the NCOP has express powers to fulfill and to facilitate its own public participation processes. It is not bound by, or it cannot rely on the fact that the National Assembly has engaged in public participation. It has a separate mandate or obligation in terms of the Constitution. So it also has to facilitate public involvement.
Also, public involvement key with intergovernmental relations?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, the NCOP has a more overarching, not responsibility, but ability in terms of its role. For example, because it has this role in respect of having so many role players at different spheres and spheres of government, if, for example, an issue arises that is common to more than one province, it can be resolved at the NCOP level, and it can address then a more one solution can then be addressed more uniformly. Okay. You know, if I could put it that way.
Okay, no, I think I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and that's obviously
that one solution, you know,
would then apply.
Address, yes.
If, for instance, there's an issue with local government. Talking about local government, let me just quickly ask. SALGA, yes, the South African Local Government Association, is represented in the NCOP.
In the NCOP.
How?
Well, they can participate in proceedings, both in the House as well as in committees, but they don't have any voting rights.
Okay, okay, all right. But if, for instance, there's an issue of local government that is prevalent in both, say, in the Western Cape and in the Eastern Cape, the NCOP can then find the solution to that problem that's prevalent in both provinces, and then how then does it then take it back? Because once the solution has now been reached, how then does the NCOP refer that back to provinces?
Well, I think that is what I was alluding to earlier. That is exactly what the NCOP can do, because it can debate within its committees where all provinces are represented and where SALGA is also represented. It can reach a solution, almost a one-size-fits-all then solution, because all provinces can make input in one forum.
Okay, and then, but then how is that then communicated back to the provinces? Is that
through your special delegates? Okay. Because your special delegates are, in fact, because those are your rotational, your special delegates are people who specifically have either an interest or specialized knowledge in the subject matter.
So a special delegate could then, for instance, if there's a housing issue that is...
Or would be someone who has expertise perhaps in that area.
So it could be the housing MEC or the human settlements MEC who then comes to the NCOP as a special delegate.
It would be a member, yeah.
All right. Interventions, what kind of interventions is the NCOP responsible for, if any?
The Constitution envisages in Section 100 and 139 respectively interventions in respect of local government as well as provincial government. In Section 139, I think it is where provincial government has can take administration over local government. And in terms of that, let me just refresh my memory. 139, I said. Let's start with 139. If I can find it. In terms of Section 139, yes, that is provincial intervention in local government. In terms of that section, when a municipality cannot or does not fulfill an executive obligation in terms of the Constitution or legislation, then of course there can be intervention by the provincial executive. And in terms of that, within a specific time frame, the NCOP can approve or disapprove the intervention. And likewise, in Section 100, provides for intervention by national executive in respect of provincial administration.
All right. Advocate, let's just hold it there for a few minutes.
I thought you wanted to cut me there.
We are, of course, busy with our special broadcast of the NCOP. We are awaiting the Chief Justice Mogoeng to enter into the chambers of the National Council of Provinces, where he will preside over the swearing-in of the NCOP's 54 permanent delegates, as well as preside over the election of its chairperson. Now, the NCOP has got 90 members. And of those 90 members, 54 of them are permanent delegates, while 36 are special delegates, and they are sent to the NCOP as and when their provincial legislatures require them to be. Let me just quickly give you a recap of how those 90, that number of 90 is reached, at least in this round. The ANC has 33 permanent delegates, as well as 27 special delegates. The Democratic Alliance has got 13 permanent delegates and only 7 special delegates, pardon me. The Economic Freedom Fighters have got 6 permanent delegates and 1 special delegate. Now, the Inkatha Freedom Party has only 1 permanent delegate and no special delegates. So too, the United Democratic Movement, headed by General Bantu Olomisa, they have got 1 permanent delegate and no special delegates. Finally, New Kids on the Block, the National Freedom Party, headed by Zanele Gamagwaza Msidi, they have got no permanent delegate, but they do have 1 special delegate. And as my guest was saying earlier on, the special delegates only have voting rights on Section 76 bills, and those are bills which are deemed to have a direct impact on provinces. We are still awaiting the entrance of the Chief Justice Mogoeng into the chambers of the National Council of Provinces. I think at this stage I'd like to continue our conversation with Advocate Zoreya Adhikari. She is joining me once again, of course, from yesterday, where she joined us when we witnessed Chief Justice Mogoeng when he took over and presided over the election, presided over the swearing in of the 400 new members of the National Assembly. And as I mentioned, she is here with us, and she is, of course, the Chief Legal Advisor to Parliament. Ma'am, just earlier on, before I took the recap, we were discussing about the NCOP's powers to intervene over in municipalities, in local government. And you were explaining to us that Section 139 of the Constitution says, when a municipality or a local government does not execute its constitutional requirements, the province can then take over. Does the province then have the responsibility to come back and report to the National Council of Provinces?
Yes. You're referring to Section 139?
Yes.
Yes. They have to report regularly. Let me just go to Section 139. Okay. There's a role for the cabinet member as well in Section 139. Here, the cabinet member responsible for the relevant cabinet member and the NCOP have almost complementary roles, if you like. The cabinet member within 28 days can disapprove the intervention, or the NCOP within 180 days. And yes, the province has a responsibility to report back, of course, and that will inform the approval or the disapproval. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does.
Yes.
It does completely.
Okay.
Now,
I don't want to become too technical to go into the
I agreed. Let's talk a little bit then about the disputes concerning the administrative capacity of the provinces. Oh, no, actually, that is what we were talking about now. Let's talk about what happens when there is a disagreement between the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces.
Well, you know, this would arise in respect of these two houses act mainly independently. There are joint sittings, of course, which would be for special purposes.
State of the Nation address.
Right, and these would not be decision-making opportunities. But where disagreements could come about would be in respect of 76 bills. These would be the only time that agreement need to be sought. In respect of Section 76 bills, there's a mediation committee, and the mediation committee would then be composed of members of both houses, and decisions are taken at a mediation committee in terms of the Constitution.
Earlier on, we spoke about the relationship between the chairperson of the NCOP and the Speaker of the National Assembly. What relationship exists between their deputies?
A similar relationship, because the deputies basically fulfill the same functions as the Speaker and the chairperson in their absence, and whatever other delegated functions they get from the Speaker and the chairperson. But I think the one thing we did not touch on, and that is quite interesting, because this is where the deputies...
We might have to hold it then.
Okay.
We just make a mark on that. We'll come back and touch on it. I see that the Chief Justice Mogoeng has just stepped into the NCOP chambers. And let's listen in as he begins the proceedings for the morning.
Please be seated. This sitting has been called by me as Chief Justice for the swearing in of permanent delegates to the National Council of Provinces, as well as the election of the chairperson of the Council. In terms of Section 62(6) of the Constitution, every permanent delegate of the National Council of Provinces has to take an oath or solemn affirmation before performing his or her functions as a delegate of this council. The delegate is entitled to take the oath or solemn affirmation in the official language of his or her choice. It has been arranged that delegates will take the oath or solemn affirmation as per province. Therefore, when the names of delegates are called out, would they please take their places in front of the table? Delegates will be asked to read the oath or affirmation in their language of choice. Thereafter, I will ask those who are taking the oath to raise their right hand and say, "So help me God," and those who are taking the affirmation to say, "I do." The oath or solemn affirmation reads as follows in English. I, you insert your name, swear or solemnly affirm that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa and will obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution and all other law of the Republic, and I solemnly promise to perform my functions as a permanent delegate to the National Council of Provinces to the best of my ability. And as earlier indicated, in the case of the oath, you say, "So help me God," and in the event of an affirmation, you say, "I do." And I'll ask the Secretary to Parliament to read the names of the first group of delegates. Secretary.
Hai Mandla, Samka Pindiwe, Suka Luto, Wana Tabiso, Panlangan, Elizabeth Christina, Gayle Lennox Bogan.
Please read the oath of affirmation in the document in your hands, which is in your preferred language. I Those who took an oath, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God." And as for those who took an affirmation, please raise your right hand and say, "I do." So help me God. Thank you. You may return to your seat. Before it is too late, let me just make this point. We had a bit of a problem in the National Assembly yesterday. Some members signing where the Chief Justice is supposed to sign. Others signing both where the member is supposed to sign and where the Chief Justice is supposed to sign. Others not signing at all. Others only signing one form. So please sign where you're supposed to and sign both, because the one copy is to be retained by the delegate, whereas the other is for record keeping. Secretary, the next group, please.
Pagisi Pello Jonas, Mohai Joel Siso, Tlake Florence Manana, Mohapi Jihad Mohapi, Mokwena Goodwill Raonolo, Mechalakis George.
Please take the oath of affirmation in line with the document in your hand. I Those of you who took an affirmation, would you please raise your right hand and say, I do? And as for those who took an oath, please raise your right hand and say, so help me God. Thank you. You may return to your seat. Secretary, please call the next group.
Mlambo Emmanuel Msawenkosi, Mutara Tasnim, Maku Eddie, Mathis Lien, Masango Bridget Staff, Julius Jax Warren William.
Well, before we proceed, and it's not an instruction, I was wondering, those delegates who are wearing hats and are men, I thought even in your house you would... Thank you. Would you please take the oath of affirmation? I Those who took an oath, would you please raise your right hand and say, so help me God? And those who took an affirmation, would you likewise raise your right hand and say, I do?
So help me God.
Thank you. You may return to your seats. And Secretary.
Nzimande Louis Paul Msekosi, Zwane Longelwa Lynette Singh, Amson Singh, Zondi Winele Prudence, Kahula Mufle Chetty Morgan.
Can you tilt it down for her benefit, please? Thank you. Please read out the oath of affirmation. I
solemnly promise to perform my function as a permanent delegate to the National Council of Provinces to the best of my ability.
And again, those who took an oath, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God." And those who took an affirmation, raise your right hand and say, "I do."
So help me God.
Thank you. You may return to your seat and please sign as indicated earlier. Secretary.
Mampuru Khwedi Tsapani, Mateme Euphemia Hunadi, Tikhalet Laras Masefako, Tobejani Godfrey Sitlamarajo, Mtileni Emmanuel Vusuana, Bayer Smith, Frederick Christian.
Let's begin with the oath of affirmation. I
That was very well done. It mustn't be as if you don't want the nation to hear what you are saying.
Those who took an oath, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God." And those who took an affirmation, raise your right hand and say, "I do."
So help me God.
Thank you. Secretary, the next group, please.
Dlamini Landulile Catherine, Mtimunya Simpiwe George, Nyambi Archibald Jomo, Mhlanga Moses Titus, Vadwa Yunus Kasim, Isaac Farad.
May we begin with the oath of affirmation. I
Farad Isaac, solemnly affirm that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa, and will obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution and all other laws of the Republic. And I solemnly promise to perform my functions as a permanent delegate to the National Council of Provinces to the best of my ability.
Those who took an affirmation, please raise your right hand and say, "I do." And those who took an oath, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. You may return to your seats. Yes, Secretary.
De Beer Charles Jacobus, Tau Raseret Johannes, Bota Yolanda, Stock Dikhang, Matubus, Mbuiselo April, Faber, Willem Frederick.
Is the 6th permanent delegate still coming or not? Very well. Let's begin. I
solemnly swear that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa and will obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution and all other laws of the Republic. And I solemnly promise to perform my functions as a permanent delegate to the National Council of Provinces to the best of my ability.
Those who took an affirmation, please raise your right hand and say, I do. And those who took an oath, please raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. You may return to your seats. Secretary.
Tebe Wingotlo, Sefako Olihile, Modise Ruth Tandi, Mutla Shopping Consolation Tikweitsile, Mokwele Josephine Tebuho, Grunewald Bernardus Hermanus.
In line with your preference, as reflected by the document in your hand, would you begin to take the oath on an affirmation? I
solemnly swear that I will obey the Republic of South Africa and will obey, respect,
and uphold the Constitution and all other law of the Republic, and I solemnly promise to perform my functions as a permanent delegate to the National Council of Provinces to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Those who took an oath, please raise your right hand and say, so help me God. And those who took an affirmation, please raise your right hand and say, I do.
I do. So help me God.
Thank you. You may return to your seats. Secretary, the last group.
Labuskachny Kathleen, Lond Johan Jakob, von Brandis Mbambo, Eugene Jeffrey, Sibukwana Tandi Gloria, Prince Ellen Klimba, Dumisani Livingstone.
Very well. Let's begin with the oath of affirmation. I,
Tandi Mkambo, solemnly swear that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa and will obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution and all other laws of the Republic. And I solemnly promise to perform my functions as a permanent delegate to the National Council of Provinces to the best of my ability.
those who took an oath, please raise your right hand and say, so help me God. And as for those who took the affirmation, please raise your right hand and say, I do.
So help me God.
Thank you. You may return to your seats. Yeah, I'm going to, is he here? Yeah. All right, very well. I know that in the case, for instance, of the Northern Cape, 6 names were read out, but only 5 delegates took the oath of affirmation. Are there any other delegates present who ought to have taken the oath or the affirmation but have not yet done so? If that be the case, please step forward so that we can administer the oath of affirmation to you. Read out the name if you know it. Well, since you're only one, is it an oath or an affirmation?
Affirmation.
Very well, let's begin with the affirmation. I
solemnly affirm that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa and I will obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution to all other laws of the Republic. I solemnly promise to perform my functions as a permanent delegate of National
Council of Provinces to the best of my ability.
Would you raise your right hand and say, I do?
I do.
Thank you. You may return to your seat. That then concludes the administration of the oath and affirmation, and we will proceed to the next level, and that is the election of the chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. Please be informed that the returning officer is the Secretary to Parliament, Mr. Michael Coetzee, and be further informed that in terms of Rule 2 of the rules for the elections, the election of the President of the Republic of South Africa, the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, the Chairperson and Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, the Premier of a province, the Speaker and Deputy Speaker of a provincial legislature, Advocate E. Pindela, Advocate B.N. Nonyani, Ms. V. Mnana, Ms. S. Bowers, Ms. S. Ali, Mr. M. Skolo, Mr. M. Mbebe, and Mr. L. Nkelewa have been appointed by the returning officer as assistant returning officers. I have already administered the oath and affirmation to the returning officer and assistant returning officers as required by the rules. Before calling for nomination, I wish to remind delegates that in terms of the Constitution and the rules, each nomination must be submitted on the prescribed form and duly seconded. Furthermore, I draw the attention of the delegates specifically to Section 64 of the Constitution, in terms of which no person may be elected as chairperson of the Council unless he or she is a permanent delegate to the Council. I also wish to inform delegates that in terms of Item 4 of Part A of Schedule 3 to the Constitution, there may be no debate in relation to the nomination. Should you wish to motivate your nomination, such must be confined to your nominee. And there will now be an opportunity for nominations for the position of chairperson of the Council.
Thank you very much, Judge President. My name is Supra Obakeng Ramoeletsi Mahumapelo, the Premier of the Northwest Province. I take this opportunity to nominate the name of Honorable Thandi Ruth Modise as the Chair of the National Council of Provinces. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Premier. The Honorable Thandi Modise has been nominated. Is the nomination seconded?
Thank you very much. I am Asifako Laradi Khali, a permanent delegate from Limpopo Province, hereby second the nomination of Honorable Thandi Ruth Modise as the chairperson of this House. Thank you.
Please present the nomination form to the returning officer. Are there no nomination forms? Secretary? Well, while they are looking for forms, Honorable Modise, let me just inquire whether, in the event of this being formalized through forms, you accept the nomination.
I accept the nomination, sir.
Thank you. just so that we don't delay the proceedings unduly, while that is being worked on, are there further nominations? No nominations? Very well. Address now. Yes. Is this the address? The assistant returning officer has just informed me that the form is in order. I've also examined it, and I'm satisfied that the nomination form has been properly completed by all the people who are supposed to complete it, and the nominee has signed. Now, only one candidate has been nominated for this position, namely the Honorable Thandi Modise. The nomination is in order. In terms of Item 5 of Part A of Schedule 3 to the Constitution, I accordingly declare Honorable Thandi Modise duly elected chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. On behalf of all present here, I have the honor of congratulating you, Honorable Thandi Modise, on your election as chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. And I now invite you to come and take your rightful place.
Order. I know that convention says and expects that I must say a few words. I will take the opportunity to do so. My respects to the Chief Justice, Ndate Mogoeng, the honorable leaders of delegations and permanent delegates to the National Council of Provinces, honorable members, distinguished guests, fellow South Africans. This morning, the sun rose to usher in new opportunities to all the species above the surface of the earth. These opportunities, as usual, are accompanied by various challenges which punctuate the meandering road to the future that we must all work for. It is in this spirit that I welcome and greatly appreciate the confidence that I have received from all those who have made it possible for me to be elected to this position in this National Council of Provinces today. Honourable members, under the leadership of the former chairperson, Ntate Mnino Mahlangu, ably deputized by Thandi Memela, this institution distinguished itself as a major contributor to the national debate on the type of the future we should fashion for our children. I think we must pay our respect, be grateful for the work that our Ntate Mahlangu and all the others that came before him did to make sure that this house is respected. Now, just as I and the outgoing chairperson might be buying the same shoes from the same brand, the ANC, it is quite clear that as a female, I do not have to fit my feet in these shoes, but must remain committed to ensuring that his legacy, his aspirations to take this house somewhere, we remain committed to. I remain indebted to the African National Congress, SG, to my province, Bokone Bopirima, for ensuring that I form a part of this multi-party setup, which is charged with the responsibility of making sure that our country is provided with responsive legislative instruments. I look forward to better relationships and partnerships between this House and the provinces. Our hands can only be on the heartbeat of our communities through ensuring that our conception of integrated development embraces the reality and totality of the challenges faced in our different provinces and local municipalities. It is in this connection that I look forward to more intimate relationships between premiers and speakers of the various provinces. In the same vein, I also look forward to better relationships between SALGA, and must emphasize that we do not have the choice but to ensure that the tide of discontent in the local government sphere is responded to adequately. Local government remains the sphere of government that is the coalface of service delivery in our country. As permanent delegates to the NCOP in this 5th Parliament, I must implore all of you to move beyond your party politics and to unite behind the pursuit of better responses to the vexing challenges that are facing our people. This is the legacy that we should be able to leave behind us at the end of our term. The National Council of Provinces has a unique and important role to play in South Africa's constitutional democracy. It represents provinces to ensure that provincial interests are taken into account in the national sphere of government. It does this mainly by providing a national forum for public consideration of issues affecting the provinces. One of the unique things about the House is that the Constitution directs it to provide for participation of representatives of organized local government, thus making sure that the voice that is important of all constituencies finds expression in this House. And this is a unique feature that the NCOP have, that I think we must not play with, that I think we must make sure really begins to form that platform for local government and provinces at a national sphere of government. Therefore, the success or failure of this measure.
Throughout my life, I saw people grow, becoming adults, take their positions in society, play their role in life. Chair, least did I know that it was some training of some sort for the kind of responsibility that this August House will assign me in 2014. He used to say to me, your siblings will do as you do, not as you say. He used to say to me, you lead from the front, at times also from the center. I'll come to that one, ma'am. They didn't hear that one. Chairperson, that is me, humbled by this responsibility. I vow to join you on the journey, Chairperson. You invited us to join you on the journey, to contribute to making the lives of our people better. I'm one of your teammates. Chair, together I believe we're going to move South Africa forward like never before. Chair, those who know me say maybe I'm soft-spoken and maybe on the less assertive side, but I can also be a slave driver because I believe in results. What's the use of coming to a house like this with the mandate of the masses of our people and fail to produce the results? Chairperson, honorable members, I am your servant. I thank you.
Well, there you have it. We'd first like to apologize for the slight technical problems that we had a little bit earlier on. But Thandi Modise has been elected chairperson of the National Council of Provinces permanently, at least for the next 5 years, and Rasiriti Tau is the permanent deputy chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. Those two will lead the NCOP for the next 5 years. Earlier on, we also saw Chief Justice Mogoeng, who swore in the 54 permanent delegates of the National Council of Provinces. I am now joined by political analyst Wahid Abdul Patel, as well as Advocate Zureya Adhikari. She has, of course, been with us for the last 2 days. Ma'am, just let me bring you in here. Thandi Modise, chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. Let's just quickly recap on her functions as the chairperson for the next 5 years.
Well, much the same as I said yesterday in respect of the role of the Speaker to the National Assembly. The chairperson of the National Council of Provinces is now the co-guardian to the precinct of Parliament, has very similar powers to the Speaker of the National Assembly in respect of the legislation that we spoke about ad nauseum over the past 2 days. So in terms of the Powers and Privileges Act, all those powers in respect of summonses and controlling the precinct and so on, in respect of the executive authority and the governance that we spoke about earlier as well. I won't go into all of that. But more specifically in respect of the House proceedings, the chairperson as well as the deputy chairperson has to ensure that there's decorum in the House, enforces the rules within the House. This is the NCOP, of course, ensures observance of the rules, preservation of order, and basically just, ensures that discipline and decorum is maintained.
Maintained at all times. All right.
Yes.
Mr. Patel, let me bring you in at this point. Now we have Thandi Modise elected as chairperson of the NCOP. Yesterday we saw Baleka Mbete being elected as the Speaker of the National Assembly. The ANC basically choosing two women to lead the institution. Is this making up for the fact that the party hasn't really appointed female premiers this time around?
Look, I think what we're beginning to see is that the ANC is sending a message that in terms of women representativity, it's about the entire system of government and system of governance in terms of where women leadership can and should be placed, and that it's not just the prominent positions that we've become accustomed to talking about on this topic, i.e. Ministers, the issue of the deputy president, which has come up time and again, of course the Speaker of Parliament, but that in fact it can happen at multiple levels, MECs, down to chairpersons and deputy chairpersons, not just of these two houses of Parliament, but also chairpersons of portfolio committees. And of course, the ruling party will still decide who it deploys to chair which committees in Parliament. And I'm going to venture that we're going to see a split down the middle in terms of gender parity when it comes to chairpersonships of committees between men and females from the ruling party. So I think they are sending a clear message, but also a message that they won't be dictated to in terms of public discourse and debate around where and how representativity should be effected. That in fact they will look at which people inside of the structures of the party are best suited to be deployed in which capacities, and how that translates into utilizing the particular skills and experience of particular individuals. And so we begin to see with the chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Thandi Modise, is someone who's chaired, in fact been the premier of a province where there have been substantive burning issues on the ground in terms of delivery, civil unrest and development in the Northwest. And we see the same thing in the National Assembly, where Baleka Mbete has obviously been for for at least 5 years, a former Speaker of the National Assembly. So I think they're sending a very strong message that this is part of their strategy, that it's not just about putting people in positions for the sake of meeting a quota around parity, but that needs to translate into the best people who are best suited for the jobs with the requisite skills and experience.
All right. And then, Advocate, let me then come back to you. Rasariti Papita was then elected as Modise's deputy chairperson in the National Council of Provinces. What kind of supporting role or functions would he have to do over the next 5 years?
Well, I think, besides supporting and being acting as presiding officer when the chairperson is not available, or substituting as a presiding officer, a very important role is, we alluded earlier to one of the mandates of the NCOP being the legislative process and its important role in the legislative process. Now, the legislative process after the introduction of a bill starts with the classification of a bill. And that is a fundamental issue in respect of how that bill is going to proceed through the passage of Parliament. Why is that so important? Because that is going to determine the extent to which provinces have an input into that bill. Now, the reason I mention that is because there is a mechanism within Parliament which comprises of the 4 presiding officers, the Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, and the chairperson and deputy chairperson of the NCOP. So the 4 of them make up this joint tagging mechanism, or JTM as we call it. And so that's a very important decision-making body. So yes, there are other committees, in-house committees, that as a chairperson, he would have a very important role to play on, such as this one, for example.
All right. And then let me bring in Mr. Patel. Mr. Patel, Advocate has now mentioned the issue of the joint tagging management. So you have these 4 very senior leaders of the House. What will be expected of them over the next 5 years in terms of where they steer this House to?
Look, I think if you look at the performance of Parliament over the last 5 years, there were a number of incidents, some that played themselves out very critically in the public domain, and others which were actually quite below the radar and bogged down in the bureaucracy of the legislative process and the legalities around it. But where you saw a number of pieces of legislation actually taking much longer than it did to be finalized, lots of questions raised around the quality of public participation, lots of questions raised around constitutionality of certain bills, and that creates added pressure on the legislative process, not just inside of Parliament, but when the President, for example, has to apply his mind when he has to assent to a bill coming out of Parliament, and he's got to take cognizance of the entire parliamentary process when he takes legal opinion on that. And that is absolutely important because Parliament is the national legislative organism in the Republic. It should be not just passing the best quality laws for the Republic, but passing it in a manner in which the lawmaking process is above reproach and should not be unnecessarily challenged for the sake of politics or for the sake of a party being aggrieved. So I think it's an absolutely critical function, because when there's a breakdown in that system, it may just be on 1 or 2 pieces of legislation, and to the extent that it traverses both houses of Parliament, you actually see it creating blockages in the entire legislative process. So it bogs down the institutional efficiency of Parliament, and so I agree with the advocate that it's quite important that bills are tagged and classified appropriately, and that in this Parliament it will be good to see that the 5th Parliament has learnt from the legacy of the 4th Parliament, where these things haven't been done properly, and to make sure that the process going forward in terms of rewriting the rules of Parliament and parliamentary procedure, which has been under review, in fact takes cognizance of how that system of tagging can be strengthened.
All right. Advocate, we've got about a minute to go. Just very, very briefly. Now you know who the presiding officers are. Essentially, you know who your bosses will be for the next 5 years. Are you looking forward to it? Are you excited?
Yes, but I have a responsibility just to correct a perception that there was something that was not being done properly in the last Parliament in respect of tagging Mr. Patel. With due respect, seconds. Yes. Yeah, the tagging question, but that is for another time.
Yeah,
but just that is a perception. Yes, it's very encouraging to know finally where we're heading. Yes, can I mention something about public participation?
Unfortunately, ma'am, we're out of time. I'm going to have to leave it right there, and thank you very much for joining us for this broadcast. Well, that's it from us in Parliament for the last 2 days, where we've brought you the election, the swearing in of the new members of Parliament for the 5th term, as well as the elections of the 4 presiding officers that will look after this House for the next 5 years. My name is Lukhanya Kalata, and from me and the team that brought you this broadcast, it's goodbye. We're handing now back over to our colleagues in Johannesburg.
Niemand besef nie, maar die Noord-Kaap lei eintlik hierdie huis van vandag af. Want Thandi Modise is oorspronklik 'n kind van die Noord-Kaap. Dieselfde geld vir Johannesburg. And that is why it is such a great honor for us to know that we are represented in this house. Our mandate is to implement the National Development Plan and to implement the manifesto of the ANC. We don't have any other mandate. And we want to thank the people of South Africa for the trust that they put in our movement, that we are the only organization that can change the lives of the poor. Chairperson,